The eviction notice fluttered against the chain-link fence like a dying bird, its red lettering stark against the gray November sky. Walt Gibson stood in what used to be his backyard, watching the demolition crew prepare their equipment. Across the street, at 73, he'd seen his share of changes in the Riverside district of Detroit, but nothing like this. Gentrification. His neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez had called it before her own eviction 3 months ago. They're pushing out everyone who built this neighborhood. Walt's small house at 1247 Maple Street had been his home for 47 years. He'd bought it fresh out of Vietnam with his Army savings, painted every room himself, and planted the oak tree that now towered over the roof. But property taxes had tripled in 2 years, and his Social Security check couldn't keep up with the city's sudden interest in urban renewal. The sound of children's laughter cut through his melancholy. Through the gaps in his fence, Walt could see them in the vacant lot next door, 3 kids who'd been playing there every day since school started. Maya, about 10, with thick braids and serious eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her brothers, twins Jamal and Jerome, maybe 8 years old, who moved with the synchronized energy that only twins possess. Walt had been watching them for weeks, noting their routine. They appeared every day after school, playing elaborate games of imagination among the weeds and discarded tires. But they always disappeared before dark, and Walt had never seen an adult come looking for them. Today felt different. The children weren't playing. They huddled together near the old shipping container that someone had abandoned in the lot, their school backpacks clutched tight. Maya was crying something Walt had never seen before. "You kids okay over there?" Walt called through the fence. Maya wiped her eyes quickly. "We're fine, Mr. Walt." She knew his name. That surprised him. In 47 years, he'd kept mostly to himself, preferring the company of his books and his memories to the complications of neighborhood. "Relationships doesn't look fine to me," Walt said, opening the gate that connected his yard to the lot. He'd installed it years ago when the lot was still a community garden, before the city let it go to seed. The twins immediately positioned themselves protectively in front of their sister, Jamal, or maybe Jerome. Walt still couldn't tell them. A part spoke up with more courage than his small frame suggested. "The lady from the county came to school today. She's coming to our house tonight." "What lady?" Walt asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. "Child Services," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Patterson called them. She said we can't keep living alone." Walt's chest tightened. Mrs. Patterson lived in the renovated brownstone 3 blocks over one of the new residents, who'd moved in as property values rose. The kind of person who saw children playing unsupervised and immediately assumed the worst. "Where are your folks?" Walt asked gently. "Mama's been gone since July," Maya said. "She got picked up by ICE at the chicken plant. They sent her back to Guatemala." "And your daddy?" Jerome, the more talkative twin, answered. "Never had one. Just different names on the birthday cards Mama used to get." Walt felt something shift. Inside his chest, a familiar pain from his Army days, when he'd watched villages full of displaced children, understanding too late that bureaucracy and good intentions could be just as destructive as bombs. "Where you been staying?" "In our house," Maya said defensively. "We pay the rent. I work at Murphy's corner store after school, and the twins collect bottles for the deposit money. We take care of ourselves." Walt looked at these 3 children, Maya with her adult eyes and defensive posture, the twins flanking her like tiny soldiers. They were survivors, making it work with a resourcefulness that would have impressed his old Army buddies. "The county lady, she say what's gonna happen. They're putting us in different homes," Jamal said, his voice cracking. "Said it's too hard to find families that want 3 kids, especially twins." Maya grabbed both her brother's hands. "We told them we won't be separated. We're family. But she said we don't get to choose." As if summoned by their conversation, a white sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman in a brown pantsuit emerged, carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone who'd had this conversation too many times. "Ms. Rodriguez," the woman called toward the children. "I'm Jana Morrison from Wayne County Child Services. We spoke on the phone." Walt watched Maya's shoulders straighten. watched the twins press closer to their sister. In that moment, he saw himself at 19, standing in a rice paddy while helicopters circled overhead, understanding that sometimes the people who claim they're there to help can cause the most damage. The social worker approached the fence. "Children, I need you to come with me now. I have temporary placements arranged, and we can discuss more permanent solutions tomorrow." "We don't want temporary placements," Maya said, her voice steady despite her tears. "We want to stay together. We have a home." Ms. Morrison's expression softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "Sweetheart, I understand this is difficult, but living alone isn't safe. The neighbors reported that you've been unsupervised for months. The state has a responsibility. They're not unsupervised." The words came out of Walt's mouth before he'd consciously decided to speak. Ms. Morrison turned to look at him with mild irritation. "Sir, this is a matter for child services. If you could please, they're not unsupervised." Walt repeated, louder this time, "They live with me." The silence that followed Walt's declaration stretched like a taut wire. Ms. Morrison adjusted her glasses and flipped through papers on her clipboard, clearly trying to process this unexpected development. "I'm sorry. Gibson. Walter Gibson. And these children live with me at 1247 Maple Street." Maya's eyes widened. Jerome grabbed Jamal's arm. They understood immediately what Walt was doing, even if they didn't understand why an old man they barely knew would risk everything for them. Ms. Morrison frowned. "Mr. Gibson, my records show these children living alone at 1251 Maple Street." Mrs. Patterson specifically reported, "Mrs. Patterson don't know everything. That goes on in this neighborhood." Walt interrupted. "These kids been staying with me since their mama got taken. Maya helps me with my groceries. The boys help with yard work. It's an arrangement that works for all of us." It was a complete lie, and everyone knew it. But Walt had learned something in Vietnam about the power of standing your ground when retreat meant losing everything that mattered. "I'll need to verify this," Ms. Morrison said, clearly skeptical. "May I see inside your home, Mr. Gibson?" Walt's stomach dropped. His house was a bachelor's quarters, no children's clothes, no toys, no evidence whatsoever that 3 kids lived there. The eviction notice was still taped to his front door, marking him as a man who couldn't even keep his own roof over his head, let alone provide for 3 children. "Of course," he said anyway. "Come on in." As they walked toward his house, Maya caught up to him. "Mr. Walt," she whispered urgently, "you don't have to do this. We'll figure something out." Walt looked down at her serious face, at the way she was already trying to protect him from the consequences of his own generosity. Sometimes figuring things out means accepting help from unexpected places. Inside, his living room looked exactly like what it was, the home of a solitary old man, military medals in a dusty display case, a well-worn recliner facing an ancient television, books stacked on every available surface. No sign that children had ever set foot in the place. Ms. Morrison took notes, her pen scratching against paper like a death sentence. "Mr. Gibson, I don't see any evidence of children living here. No clothes, no toys." "No, we keep our stuff upstairs," Maya said quickly. "Mr. Walt likes us to keep the common areas neat." Walt marveled at the girl's quick thinking, but Ms. Morrison wasn't buying it. "Show me," she said. Walt's heart hammered as they climbed the stairs to his spare bedroom. It contained nothing but boxes of his late wife's belongings, items he'd never been able to bring himself to donate or throw away. Grace had been gone 15 years, but her presence still filled that room like trapped sunlight. Maya pushed open the door and stepped inside without hesitation. "This is where we sleep," she announced, as if the boxes of women's clothing and vintage purses were perfectly normal furniture for children. "We have sleeping bags," Jerome added helpfully. "Mr. Walt says it's like camping." Ms. Morrison made more notes. Walt could practically see her mental checklist: inadequate sleeping arrangements, questionable living conditions, elderly guardian with obvious health and financial issues. "Mr. Gibson," she said finally, "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but these children need stable homes with proper resources. You're facing eviction yourself. I noticed the notice on your door. How can you provide for 3 children?" When you can't maintain your own housing, the question hit Walt like a physical blow. She was right, of course. He was a 73-year-old man with a bad heart, living on Social Security, about to lose his home. He had no business trying to care for 3 children. But as he looked at Maya, Jamal, and Jerome, 3 kids who'd been abandoned by systems and circumstances beyond their control, he thought about Grace, about the children they'd never had, about the dreams that had died with her, and the decades of quiet regret that had followed. "Ma'am," Walt said slowly, "I may not have much, but I got something these kids need more than fancy bedrooms and college funds." "And what's that?" "Someone who won't give up on them." Ms. Morrison's expression softened slightly, but she shook her head. "Mr. Gibson, good intentions aren't enough. These children they need each other." Walt interrupted, "And they need someone who understands that family isn't always about blood or legal papers or perfect circumstances. Sometimes it's about making a choice to show up when showing up matters." Maya stepped closer to Walt, and the twins flanked him like they had their sister earlier. In that moment, they looked like a family mismatched and unlikely, but bound together by something stronger than convenience. "I'm sorry," Ms. Morrison said, genuinely regretful now, "but I have a job to do. These children need proper care, and I have court orders to follow." She reached for her phone, presumably to call for backup or transportation. Walt watched her dial and felt 47 years of memories pressing down on him. This house, this neighborhood, these kids, they were all disappearing, swept away by forces too big for any of them to fight. But sometimes, Walt remembered from his army days, the most important battles weren't about winning. They were about making sure everyone knew you'd shown up to fight. "Maya," he said quietly, "take your brothers outside for a minute." The girl hesitated, then nodded. "Come on," she told the twins. "Let's give Mr. Walt some space." When they were gone, Walt looked directly at Ms. Morrison. "How long before you take them?" "I can have transport here within the hour. We'll place them in emergency foster care tonight, then work on more permanent solutions." "And what are the chances they stay together?" Ms. Morrison's silence was answer enough. Walt nodded slowly. "Then I guess we got an hour to figure some things out." Word spread through the Riverside neighborhood faster than Walt thought possible. By the time Ms. Morrison finished her phone calls, a small crowd had gathered on Maple Street. Mrs. Chen from the corner market, old Pete who fixed cars in his driveway, the Gonzalez family from 2 streets over, people Walt had lived near for decades, but never really known. "What's all this about, Walt?" Pete asked, gesturing toward the official county vehicle and the social worker who was now waiting for backup. Maya answered before Walt could speak. "They want to split us up, send us to different homes, because nobody wants 3 kids together." Mrs. Chen made a sound of disgust. "That's ridiculous. These children are good kids. Maya helps me stock shelves, never takes anything without paying. The boys always say please and thank you. The system doesn't care about that," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Father Martinez from St. Anthony's Catholic Church walking up the sidewalk. Word had reached him too, apparently. Ms. Morrison emerged from her car, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the growing crowd. "Father, I appreciate the community concern, but this is a legal matter. These children have been living without adequate supervision," says. "Who?" Mrs. Chen interrupted. "Mrs. Patterson, who's lived here all of 6 months. What does she know about this neighborhood?" The children admitted they've been living alone. "They live with all of us," old Pete said firmly. "Maya gets groceries for half the block. The boys help me with oil changes on weekends. Just because they don't all sleep under the same roof doesn't mean they don't have family." Walt watched this unfold with growing amazement. He'd spent 47 years in this neighborhood thinking he was invisible, irrelevant. But apparently the children had woven themselves into the fabric of Riverside in ways he'd never noticed. Father Martinez stepped forward. "Ms. Morrison, I've been ministering in this community for 20 years. These children are known to me, cared for by many families here. If the county's concern is adequate supervision, I can provide documentation of community support." "That's not how the system works, Father. Legal guardianship requires, then make it legal," Walt said. surprising himself with his own voice. "I'll petition the court for custody." Ms. Morrison turned to him with barely concealed frustration. "Mr. Gibson, you're 73 years old, facing eviction, with no steady income beyond Social Security. No family court would award you custody of 3 children. What if he wasn't alone?" Mrs. Chen asked. "What if the whole neighborhood supported the petition?" Community support is nice, but it doesn't change the fundamental issues of housing and financial stability. What about housing? Everyone turned to see a woman approaching from the end of the street. She was tall, professionally dressed, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Walt didn't recognize her, but something about her presence commanded attention. "I'm sorry," Ms. Morrison said. "And you are?" "Diana Reeves. I'm a real estate attorney, and I represent the Riverside Community Development Corporation." She pulled out a business card. "We've been monitoring the gentrification issues in this neighborhood, and we have some solutions that might interest Mr. Gibson." Walt stared at her. "Ma'am, I appreciate the gesture, but I can't afford legal help. Our services are pro bono for longtime residents facing displacement." Diana interrupted. "Mr. Gibson, you've lived at this address for 47 years, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you've maintained the property, paid taxes, contributed to the community." "Best I could." Diana smiled. "Then you qualify for our homestead protection program. We can fight the eviction and potentially convert your property to a community land trust. You'd maintain lifetime residency rights, but the land would be protected from future speculation." Ms. Morrison was frantically taking notes. "That still doesn't address the financial stability issue for child custody." "Actually, it does." Father Martinez interjected. "St. Anthony's has been approved for a new after-school program grant. We need a site coordinator position 20 hours a week, benefits included. Maya already helps with the younger children during our summer programs." Walt felt dizzy. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity to use your experience helping children. Your military service record shows leadership training, and your 47 years in this neighborhood demonstrate commitment to community. But the county's requirements," Ms. Morrison tried again, "will be met," Diana said firmly. "Stable housing through the land trust, steady income through the church position, community support that's been documented for months." "What specific requirements wouldn't be satisfied?" Ms. Morrison looked through her papers, clearly grasping for objections. "The children's immigration status." Maya mentioned her mother was deported. "The children are U.S. citizens," Diana said, "born at Detroit Receiving Hospital. I've already pulled their birth certificates." Walt looked around at the faces surrounding him, neighbors he'd barely spoken to, a priest he'd never attended services for, a lawyer he'd never met, all of them standing in his defense, fighting for 3 children who'd somehow become the heart of a community he'd never realized he belonged to. "Why?" he asked, the word coming out hoarse with emotion. "Why are you all doing this?" Mrs. Chen answered first. "Because those children chose you, Walt, and because you chose them back. Because," old Pete added, "sometimes the best families are the ones nobody expects." Maya stepped forward. Her brothers closed behind her. "Mr. Walt, we know you don't have to do this. We know it's hard and scary, and you might lose everything. But we want you to know whatever happens, you're already our family. You stood up for us when nobody else would." Walt knelt down to their level, his old knees protesting on the sidewalk. "You kids understand this is going to be complicated. I'm not rich, I'm not young, and I don't know much about raising children. We don't need rich," Jerome said solemnly. "We just need someone who won't leave and will help teach you about kids," Jamal added. "Maya's real good at explaining stuff." Walt looked at Ms. Morrison, who was putting away her phone with obvious reluctance. "Ma'am, what do I need to do to make this official?" She sighed deeply. "File a petition for emergency custody, demonstrate stable housing and income, pass a home study evaluation, complete parenting classes." "Done," Diana said. "I'll have the paperwork filed by morning. The church can fast-track his employment application," Father Martinez added. "And we'll all testify as character witnesses," Mrs. Chen declared, getting nods from the gathered neighbors. Ms. Morrison looked around at the determined faces surrounding her, then back at the 3 children who were now holding Walt's weathered hands. "This is highly irregular," she said finally. "But given the community support and the legal representation, I can delay removal pending the custody hearing. 30 days, 30 days. Walt repeated, "To become a father at 73. Maya squeezed his hand. "To become our dad," she corrected. "You already know how to be family. We've been watching you do it every day." 3 weeks later, Walt stood in his transformed living room, marveling at how dramatically a house could change when children inhabited it. Maya's books were stacked neatly on the coffee table next to his own. The twins shared art project, a massive drawing of their new family tree, covered most of one wall. Grace's old sewing room had become Maya's bedroom, and the boys had claimed the former guest room, turning it into what they called their twin headquarters. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Diana had prepared them thoroughly, walking Walt through probable questions and helping Maya understand what she might be asked as the oldest child. The twins, being younger, would likely only be interviewed informally by the court-appointed guardian ad litem. "Nervous?" Maya asked, finding Walt standing by the window, watching the demolition crew work on the abandoned house across the street. "Terrified," he admitted. "What if I mess this up?" Maya joined him at the window. At 10 years old, she possessed a wisdom that sometimes took Walt's breath away. "Mr. Walt, I mean, Dad, you know what I learned from watching Mama try to take care of us by herself." "What's that?" "Family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up every day and trying your best." Walt put his arm around her shoulders. The simple gesture had taken weeks to feel natural. 47 years of living alone didn't prepare a man for the physical affection that children needed. But Maya had been patient with his awkwardness, teaching him through her own need for comfort and stability. "Your mama sounds like she was a smart woman." She was, but she was scared all the time. Scared of being caught, scared of not having enough money, scared of what would happen to us if something happened to her. Maya looked up at Walt. "You're not scared the same way." "I'm scared plenty," Walt said. "Just different kinds of scared. Good scared, though. Scared because you care, not scared because you're alone." The front door burst open, and the twins tumbled in, backpacks flying. They attended the after-school program at St. Anthony's now, where Walt worked as the site coordinator. The job had turned out to be a perfect fit. His military experience with logistics and his natural calm with children made him invaluable to Father Martinez's chaotic but beloved program. "Dad," Jerome called out. The name still sent a warm shock through Walt's chest every time he heard it. "Mrs. Chen says you got mail from the lawyer lady." Walt found the envelope on the kitchen counter, official letterhead making his hands shake slightly as he opened it. Maya and the twins gathered around him as he read. "What's it say?" Jamal asked impatiently. Walt read the letter twice before answering. "Says the home study evaluation came back approved. Says our financial situation meets the court's requirements for guardianship." He looked up at 3 anxious faces. "Says we're gonna be okay." The celebration was immediate and overwhelming. The twins launched themselves at Walt with enough force to nearly knock him over, while Maya hugged his waist with fierce joy. For a moment, the kitchen filled with the kind of chaos Walt had never experienced, but had somehow been missing his entire life. "Does this mean it's official?" Maya asked. "Not yet. Still got the hearing on Monday. But Diana says this makes it real likely the judge will approve everything." That evening, as Walt tucked the boys into their beds, another ritual that had gradually evolved from awkward necessity into cherished routine, Jerome asked the question that had been lingering in all their minds. "Dad, what happens if the judge says no?" Walt sat on the edge of Jerome's bed, choosing his words carefully. "Well, we'd have to figure out another way. Maybe appeal the decision, maybe find a different solution. But we wouldn't give up." Jamal pressed. "No," Walt said firmly. "We wouldn't give up. Sometimes the right thing takes longer than we want, but that doesn't mean it's not worth fighting for." Maya appeared in the doorway. "Can I tell them about the surprise?" Walt smiled. Over the past week, Maya had been working on something secret, enlisting Mrs. Chen's help and using her earnings from the corner market. "Go ahead." Maya pulled a wrapped package from behind her back. "It's for all of us, but mostly for Dad." Walt unwrapped it carefully, his weathered fingers struggling with the tape. Inside was a simple wooden picture frame containing a photograph he'd never seen before. It showed him and the 3 children at the church barbecue the previous weekend, all of them laughing at something Father Martinez had said. They looked like a family mismatched maybe, but genuinely happy. Mrs. Chen took it. Maya explained. She said every family needs pictures to remember the good times. Walt's throat tightened. It's perfect. Look at the back. Jerome urged. Walt turned the frame over. In Maya's careful handwriting, someone had inscribed, "The Gibson family, built on love, not blood." Maya wrote it, Jamal said proudly, but we all thought of it together. Walt looked at the 3 children, who had somehow transformed his quiet, solitary life into something rich and meaningful. "You know what I think?" "What?" they asked in unison. "I think we already passed the only test that really matters." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical November weather in Detroit. Walt wore his best suit, the same one he'd worn to Grace's funeral 15 years ago, and Maya had insisted on braiding her hair specially for court. The twins wore matching button-down shirts that Mrs. Chen had donated, looking serious and grown-up. Diana met them at the courthouse, carrying a briefcase full of supporting documents. "Remember," she told Walt, "answer honestly, speak from the heart, and trust that 3 weeks of being a family have prepared you for this." Judge Patricia Williams was a stern-looking woman in her 60s who reminded Walt uncomfortably of his old drill sergeant. She reviewed the paperwork thoroughly before addressing the courtroom. "Mr. Gibson, this is an unusual case. You're asking the court to grant custody of 3 minor children to a 73-year-old man with no prior parenting experience. Why should I believe this arrangement is in the children's best interests?" Walt stood up, his heart hammering. "Your Honor, 3 months ago, I was a lonely old man waiting to die in an empty house. These children didn't just need a home, they gave me a reason to keep living. They made me understand that family isn't about perfect circumstances or ideal timing. It's about people choosing to take care of each other." "Maya," the judge said, turning to the girl, "you're old enough to have an opinion about this. Do you want Mr. Gibson to be your legal guardian?" Maya stood up straight, meeting the judge's eyes with remarkable composure. "Yes, ma'am. He's not perfect, and we're not perfect, but we're perfect together. He's the first adult who ever listened when we said we wanted to stay together as a family." Judge Williams made notes, then looked at the twins. "Boys, do you understand what it means for Mr. Gibson to adopt you?" Jerome answered for both of them. "It means he promises to take care of us forever, and we promise to take care of him too." "And is that what you want?" "Yes, ma'am," both boys said simultaneously. The judge reviewed her papers one final time, then looked up with the hint of a smile. "Mr. Gibson, the court finds that despite your unconventional qualifications, you have demonstrated the ability to provide a stable, loving home for these children. Community support has been extraordinary. Your financial situation has been stabilized. And most importantly, these children clearly thrive in your care." She banged her gavel once. "Custody is granted. Congratulations to the Gibson family." 6 months later, Walt stood in his backyard, now legally protected from development through the community land trust, watching Maya help the twins plant tomatoes in the garden they'd started together. The house was no longer quiet, no longer empty, no longer just a place where he waited for time to pass. At 73, Walt Gibson had learned that sometimes the most important families are the ones nobody expects, built not on blood or law, but on the simple decision to show up for each other when showing up matters most. The neighborhood had changed, but it hadn't disappeared, and neither had the possibility of home.